And other trails in Peterborough have been important to people this summer. That's great. Well, once again, thank you for being here and welcome to our 31st annual celebration.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 2020 annual celebration of the Monadnock Conservancy. I know there are a lot of... Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 2020 annual celebration of the Monadnock Conservancy. I know there are a lot of ways that you could be spending your Saturday morning other than staring into a screen, but I'm glad that you've chosen to be with us today. My name is Ryan Owens, and I'm the Monadnock Conservancy's Executive Director. Believe me when I say that I regret us not being together in person today, and I'd much rather be looking into your live faces right now. But as we've learned to do since March, we're making do with the hand that we're dealt, and I'm grateful that we can at least be together virtually. Of course, no one could have predicted that we'd need to meet this way, nor predicted all the other ways life has changed since last year. It's been an incredibly challenging year, but I'm happy to say that, thanks largely to the support of friends like you, the Monadnock Conservancy has remained resilient and successful. That's thanks to you, and it's also thanks to the dedication of those inside the organization, namely the Board of Trustees and the staff. When I think back to the role of the board, especially since winter, the words that come to mind are calm and trust. Rather than panic over uncertainty, the board knew that land still mattered, maybe even mattered more, and they trusted the staff to keep doing the work that needed to be done. I want to thank the board officers especially for their leadership during this time. President Steve Larman, Vice President Peter Kenyon, Secretary Hillary Irwin, and Treasurer Drew Landry. Reaching the end of their board terms this year were Peggy Pashir of Walpole and Monica Lehner of Greenfield. Peggy I'll always remember as someone with the insight and the courage to ask the hard questions. Monica, who also served a term as president, brought to the board an energy and enthusiasm that could rally anyone to action, and both women were ever eager to work, especially on the tasks that few others wanted. Taking their seats on the board are new trustees, Phoebe Bray of Stoddard and Brad Malt of Peterborough. Phoebe brings not only a love of the region, and especially of Stoddard, but also valuable insights on human needs in the Monadnock region as Executive Director of the Community Kitchen, a key nonprofit that tackles food insecurity. Brad recently retired from a career in law, and he's been involved in conservation efforts from New England to Patagonia. I thank all the trustees for their service to the Conservancy, but I want to thank the staff most of all. Back in March, with little notice, they packed their offices and moved home, some to closets and basements, some to painfully slow internet speeds, some to the distractions of kids and family, and all to suboptimal conditions of one kind or another. And yet, they delivered another extraordinary year of ensuring that the landscape of the Monadnock region benefits forests, farms, wildlife, water, and people, especially people. The staff also grew and changed during this time. Back in December, Nat Stout became our new office manager. In late February, Alex Metzger came on as stewardship director, just a few weeks before everyone got sent home again. Pete Troop, who worked at the Conservancy years ago, rejoined the staff in June as conservation project manager after a hiatus working at the town of Peterborough. Pete filled the space vacated by Stacy Sabula, who was promoted to be our very first deputy director. Stewardship coordinator Richard Pendleton became our latest regular employee after more than a year supporting the Conservation Easement Stewardship Program on a temporary basis. And finally, we've been fortunate to have since spring, albeit only temporarily, Anna Hubbard, who has done everything from refine the data that underlies our computer mapping and analysis, our geographic information systems, to bashing up rocks with a sledgehammer for trail building at places like Cunningham Pond. At the Conservancy, we strive to be a responsive organization, one that listens and learns in order to do better. And two lessons stand out to me most of all from the past year. First, the COVID-19 pandemic and the isolation and boredom and anxiety that is heaped upon us have made it more clear than ever that land and nature and access to them are critical to the well-being of minds and bodies. Visitation numbers at parks and open spaces are way up. Why? Because it makes us feel good in a time of so much worry and sadness. That access can certainly be recreational, such as a trail, but it can also be scenic, such as a roadside view, or even nutritional, such as healthy food grown on a farm. As our keynote speaker, the Reverend Stephen Blackmer, has said to me, connection with the earth even transcends the physical to the spiritual, making conservation itself a sacred practice. The concept of connecting people to the land has been an important strategic goal of ours for a while now, but it's become an especially high priority since winter, which I hope will be apparent in the projects I describe later in the program. The second lesson we learned is that, sadly, we continue to live in an unjust society, and that, whether intentional or not, injustice is endemic, even to the conservation world. Too many parks and open spaces, though beloved, were created at the expense of people displaced. And too many are designed or located such that they are effectively beyond the reach of too many people. We have so much to celebrate today, so I'm not going to dwell on this topic. But I don't want us to forget that we have a duty to address all inequity, especially that which we have the direct power to resolve. In a moment, I'm going to hand off to, well, to me, but the live me, to recount our conservation successes of the past year. Then we'll give this year's annual awards, followed by Reverend Stephen Blackmer's keynote address, and finally my closing. But first, I want to tell you about where I am right now, because you're probably thinking, with the road noise in the background, it's an odd setting. If I'm going to the trouble of filming this introduction, you'd think I'd go somewhere with a grand backdrop, like in front of a waterfall or on top of Mount Monadnock. Places like that are great, but it's important to remember that you don't need to drive a long distance or own special gear or climb a mountain to receive the benefits of time in nature. This is especially important right now, when we're actively seeking to increase diversity, equity, and inclusion in access to the outdoors. Nature, and all that it offers, can be found in a backyard, or in an overgrown, forgotten lot at the edge of downtown, which is precisely where I am right now in Winchester, New Hampshire. This place may not look like much right now, but it's surrounded by neighborhoods from which people can walk here. It's next door to a preschool, and most importantly, it's green. And if all goes according to plan, next year, this time, it will have been transformed into a new park, a nature park and learning forest, where kids and community members can safely play and explore. I'll tell you more about that plan later in the program, but for now, thanks again for joining us today. Good morning, everyone. This is Ryan coming to you live. Thanks again for being with us today. Though the backdrop of my video may not have been all that spectacular, I'm hopeful that the images I'm about to share about our work in the past year will make up for it. But first, a word about this map. Each year for annual celebration, our computer mapping specialist, Rick Brackett, prepares a beautiful new updated map of conserved lands across the Monadnock region. And usually we print that map as a huge poster for anyone to study up close and in person at the annual celebration. Because we don't want Rick's work to be in vain, I want you to know that in a few days, everyone will receive an email follow-up to this event. And in it will be a link to where you can find this map on our website. You'll be able to download it and zoom in on all the details to your heart's content. I mentioned in my intro some new and shifting priorities for the Conservancy, but some priorities have remained the same.
And 2 of those are to conserve land for important ecological benefits and clean water. The Burse conservation easement in Jaffrey and Ringe, which we purchased in May, fits both priorities. Jim Burse, who is the 4th generation of his family to live on the property, told us, and I quote, "There's just about every species of wildlife you could see and find in New England here. He and his wife Lisa have seen moose, black bear, bobcat, deer, fisher, mink, porcupine, beaver, red and gray fox, opossum, skunk, and raccoon." There are 50 acres of wetlands on the property, and the southern part is in the wellhead protection area for the water system that serves Franklin Pierce University, located just to the south. The other important feature of the property is that it's part of a growing north-south corridor of conserved lands running right through Mount Monadnock. These corridors matter because as the climate changes, species and communities of species will shift north to follow their preferred climatic conditions, and corridors ensure they can make this shift largely unimpeded by development. This helps ecological systems remain largely intact and functional, and it's one of the most important things a conservation organization can do to help mitigate the effects of climate change. Scenic views and rural character also remain priorities, and Sargent Hill Farm in Walpole features both. Jack Pratt donated this conservation easement in late 2019. And the views, unfortunately, are all of Vermont, but we can let that slide. This property, too, is part of a growing corridor that neighbors along Reservoir Road in Walpole are seeking to piece together between existing blocks of conservation land. Of course, conserving farmland and supporting farms remain very high priorities, and we completed 2 more farm conservation projects in the past year, both purchased conservation easements. The Wood Farm easement protects 28 acres in Walpole near the confluence of the Cold River and the Connecticut River. Landowner Chip Wood completed the conservation easement to honor a promise made to his father to never sell the land to a developer. He also told us, and I quote, "Conserving ensures that my 2 sons can continue to farm. They'll take it over and manage it." Presently, crops grown on the property support a dairy farm just up the river in Charlestown, New Hampshire. The property also sits atop a huge groundwater aquifer that runs along the Connecticut River Valley, and the conservation easement features a unique provision allowing the landowner to work with the state or town to install a municipal water well someday if the need arises. A few towns south in Chesterfield is Lucky and Barb Evans's property, on which we purchased a conservation easement this spring. The Chesterfield Conservation Commission, which helped fund the project, had long targeted this property for conservation because of its scenic views and status as farmland. The property is on a particularly scenic stretch of Route 63 near the village of Chesterfield, and the majority of the acreage features soil ranked by the Natural Resources Conservation Service, part of the U.S. Department of Agriculture, as prime, which is the highest ranking for farmland soil. Lucky, shown here with his daughter Ingrid, said to us, "New Hampshire agriculture is rare and important. I'd like to see this land stay a hayfield or a farm. I think it's a choice for the future." Last but not least was our biggest project of the past year, at least in terms of resource expenditure, the community-funded purchase of about 100 acres on Peterborough's Cunningham Pond in December. I won't retell the long saga of how this project came to be. You can read that and much more on our website. But I will tell you that it never would have been possible without the initial grassroots efforts of a group of neighbors who had the will and the energy and the persistence to bring the then owners to the bargaining table and strike a deal to buy the land, the contract for which they then assigned to the Monadnock Conservancy. I'll also tell you that this project was a long, hard road, and I'll admit that there were times when I was ready to quit. But we didn't, and I think what kept us going was the community's tremendous support for the project. Despite the huge price tag, none of our funding came from state or federal sources. Nearly all of it was local, more than 260 donations of all sizes from individuals and families, and the town of Peterborough's largest ever grant of municipal conservation funds. Now protected forever, the property has a little bit of everything in terms of conservation values. This beautiful hilltop field, magical woods, diverse wildlife habitat, shoreline on Cunningham Pond, and scenic frontage on Route 101. But what may be most significant of all is that now the property is open to the public. Thanks to the extraordinary efforts of volunteers from the Student Conservation Association and Conservancy staffers Rick Brackett and Anna Hubbard, there is now a new trailhead parking area and a well-marked and beautiful trail network traversing nearly the entire property. My favorite route is a loop of just under 2 miles from the main trailhead through the woods, up and over the field, along the pond, and back out again. If you haven't visited yet, I invite you to check it out. You can find this map on the hiking page of our website. Though our newest land protection projects may get all the glory, they're far from the only things we do each year, and so I want to acknowledge a few other programs and projects. Earlier in the year, before we bought the land on Cunningham Pond, Rick Brackett designed and built a new trailhead and trail at our Chamberlain Conservation Area in Fitzwilliam, which we purchased in 2018. The trail starts on a section of the Cheshire Rail Trail, where it crosses Old Turnpike Road, just north of the Massachusetts border. The rail trail then leads to a side trail on a peninsula jutting into Sit Pond, actually the only means of public access to the pond. And if you're not as adventurous as my son Henry, a wide, level trail leads to the water and eventually to the end of the peninsula, a perfect spot for a picnic with views of Monadnock. The entire route is about 1.6 miles round trip. The new trail was a partnership between us, the Fitzwilliam Conservation Commission, and the local snowmobile club, which uses the trail for access onto the pond ice in the winter. Arguably the most important yet least glorious program of the Monadnock Conservancy is the Easement Stewardship Program, which is staffed by Alex Metzger, Richard Pendleton, who's on the right in the photo, and for much of the past spring and summer, Anna Hubbard, and assisted by a few dozen hardy volunteers like Jack Condos in the picture. If these folks don't do their job, the land we've protected doesn't stay protected. Most days of the year, the members of this team are out in the woods doing things like this, meeting with landowners or crashing through the woods, often off trail, looking for remote property corners. Their number one job is to visit and assess every one of the 225 properties protected by our conservation easements every single year to ensure that the rules written into those conservation easements are being followed. They're unsung heroes because when their job is done right, it's because nothing happened. It means that they've cultivated good relationships with the owners of those protected properties, supporting them in making good land management decisions. And if something does happen, it's usually something bad and requires them to spring into action to halt the activity. Fortunately, they keep doing this hard work and they do it well. In fact, in the past year, thanks to the pandemic and fewer distractions like meetings, they were able to get way ahead of schedule in their annual property visits, and they also had time to streamline and modernize our record-keeping systems. Those high standards they uphold are no doubt some of the reasons our accreditation with the Land Trust Accreditation Commission was renewed earlier this summer. The accreditation program was developed in 2007 to provide objective verification that land trusts are upholding high standards of responsible, ethical, and effective governance, financial management, land protection, and land stewardship. We've always taken accreditation very seriously because it makes us a stronger organization. We're proud to have been the first New Hampshire land trust to earn the honor back in 2008. And earning renewal was a great way to cap off such a strange and challenging year. So now I'll hand things back to Lindsay for another audience poll.
Thank you, Ryan. Well, there are 6 key values that guide our work at the Conservancy. These values help us embrace the connections between the well-being of our community and the land that we cherish. You'll see another poll on the middle of your screen. Please choose the value that matters most to you. We'll give folks just one more moment to finish that poll. And as we wait for folks to finish filling out that poll, just a reminder that you can use the chat box and the question and answer box to reach out and ask us any questions. We will moderate a question and answer session at the end of the presentation. Okay, we're going to wrap up that poll and share our results. Okay, so it seems like for this group today anyway, the number one most important benefit is land protection for the benefit of wildlife. Yeah, that is an important one. Great. Well, Ryan, I will hand this back to you.
Thank you, Lindsay. It's now my great pleasure to present the John C. Calhoun Forester Professional Advisor Award to Wendy Ward. In 2011, the trustees of the Monadnock Conservancy, in cooperation with the children of the late John C. Calhoun Jr., established the John C. Calhoun Forester Professional Advisor Award. And if you knew John Calhoun and his family, you'll know why it was so important that the title of Forester remained in the title of the award. The purpose of the award is to recognize exceptional individuals and professional associations whose trusted service and technical knowledge guide client landowners toward a greater understanding of land conservation in the Monadnock region. Wendy Ward has worked with the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Natural Resources Conservation Service since 1995, and she was recently promoted to District Conservationist, in which capacity she oversees all NRCS staff and programs for Cheshire and Sullivan counties. For 25 years, Wendy has worked directly with landowners, providing conservation planning and assistance designed to conserve soil, water, air, plants, and animals. Wendy has also been a member of the Monadnock Conservancy's Lands Committee for 8 years. She never fails to regale other committee members while on field visits, identifying with such great enthusiasm another bird or plant. I have no doubt that when she's visiting landowners with her NRCS hat on, she inspires the same kind of awe that she does in us, which can only lead to positive conservation outcomes. Congratulations, Wendy, and thanks for all you do. We're happy to honor and celebrate you with this video that tells a little more about how you came to be such a champion for conservation.
I started on the Lands Committee, I think, around 2013, and I have just enjoyed every minute of being on the Lands Committee. It's fun to get out and see the properties. I always complain that there's never enough time. We get out there for about an hour because there's always so much to see. You know, you could get lost in this sea of ferns here for a half hour just trying to identify all of them. But it's so much fun to go out to see what excites people about their property and why they want to conserve it. And then I have my own view of what I see in a property, just from the ecology and the plants and the wildlife. And it's a lot of fun to talk with people about that. And I feel as though I am who I am because of my parents primarily. My dad was an avid bird watcher. He loved plants, wildflowers. He took me hiking when I was little, my sister and I. And I just learned my love of being outdoors, what birds were what, um, and then from there, I always walked around with a field guide in my hand, and I was always catching up with other people because I needed to know what things were. But then beyond what things were, what's the ecology of them? You know, what do they need? What is their habitat? And it's a lifelong study because there are so many things I don't know. Um, and my mother was the hardest worker I ever met. And I just, she instilled a real sense of appreciation for a job well done. And so I'm always trying to work hard um, and hope that my work is benefiting the environment and the people around me and my community.
Congratulations, Wendy, again, and thanks. It's now my pleasure to present the Volunteer of the Year Award to Peter Boblowski. The trustees of the Monadnock Conservancy created this award in 2013 to honor the selfless service of the Conservancy's volunteers and their incredible commitment to going above and beyond the call of duty, including, but not limited to, monitoring conservation easements, clearing and maintaining trails, making phone calls, representing the organization at events, serving on committees, and assisting with other Conservancy-related efforts. When I joined the Conservancy staff in 2006, Peter was already a legendary land steward, which is what we call the volunteers who visit or monitor annually the properties on which we hold conservation easements. He's still a legend because we can always count on his reports to be thorough and submitted on time. He monitors a block of conservation easements that have far and away the most technically complicated boundaries of all our holdings, and he often serves as a role model for other volunteers. Congratulations, Peter, and thank you. This recognition was a long time coming, and we're happy to honor you with this video in which you describe in your own words what volunteering for the Conservancy means to you.
Believer in the Conservancy, and it's protecting the land that we love. There are quite a number of easements on this north end of Silver Lake. One of them is Loon Island. I'm sitting on Loon Island, on the rock outcrop on Loon Island at Silver Lake in the town of Hammersville. The island itself is a conserved piece of property with the Conservancy, and just in a short distance there are several other properties that are conserved with the Monadnock Conservancy. I am very pleased to be awarded Volunteer of the Year. I never thought that would be a possibility. I'm very, what would the word be? Shocked, amazed, very pleased to have that recognition. I don't do my volunteer work for recognition, but it's, on the other hand, very nice to be recognized, and I thank the Conservancy.
Congratulations again, Peter, and thanks for all your years of volunteering. I'm now honored to introduce our keynote speaker, the Reverend Stephen Blackmer. In one form or another, Steve has existed in my consciousness as someone special, going back to the start of my career in New England conservation in 2002, even though we didn't meet until many years later. I was searching at the time for my own conservation identity, and what helped me begin to find it was the organization Steve founded, the Northern Forest Center, which I thought at the time had such a holistic and healthy view of the relationship between people, community development, and forests in the Northeast. Steve caught my attention again later when I learned of his curious midlife shift to become a priest in the Episcopal Church while still keeping a foot in the conservation world. I remember seeking out a session he was leading at a conference and finding that what he was saying and what he was doing were breaths of fresh air. So, Steve, thank you for those influences over the years, and thank you for being with us today.
Hi, everybody. I'm hoping everybody can hear me and see me. I'm imagining all of your faces because all I'm seeing is a blank screen right now, but that is just fine. So in my imagination, I envision you sitting there looking at me, but with your minds turned towards the outside. So if I were to put a name to this talk, I would say this, we're exploring conservation as sacred practice. As Ryan said in his introduction, I've made a transition in my life from professional conservationist to a priest in the Episcopal Church, with my church being Church of the Woods in Canterbury, New Hampshire. And I'm going to try and give you a very quick view of why this happened and what Church of the Woods is about, and then turn towards our imaginations for you to explore that yourself. So 2 questions. Well, a question that began to arise for me in the early 2000s was, as I began to become aware of the magnitude of climate change, which this is 2002, 3, 4, has obviously grown substantially more since then. Climate change and just the scope of ecological devastation around the world. I began to feel that there was a deeper need, a deeper question beneath my practices of conservation and sustainable community development. Those led me through ways that I don't have time to talk about with you today, but to leave the work at the Northern Forest Center that Ryan mentioned, and to go to divinity school, to learn the Christian faith. I did not grow up in the church, in any spiritual practice other than being outdoors. But when I went off to seminary, I carried 2 questions with me. One is, how can we restore the sense of sacredness to conservation, which is what we're exploring today? How John Muir in particular, but many other early conservationists, spoke often and passionately from his background in the Christian tradition, speaking about the earth as sacred. His writings are filled with that kind of language. And yet somehow in the ensuing century, the conservation movement, the environmental community generally, has almost entirely lost the ability to speak about the earth, about the land as sacred. How can we restore that? So that was one question I went off to school with. The other question was, how can we restore the earth, the land itself, as central to religious understanding, and for me in particular, Christian understanding? For most of us, whether we practice it or not now, the Judeo-Christian tradition is our spiritual and religious ancestry, and it is through that I was asked by the divine mystery to explore all of these kinds of questions. So off I went off to seminary to learn all about this, or what I could in 3 years at Yale Divinity School. When I came back to Canterbury, where I have lived for many years, I'd been trying to buy a piece of land for a long time. Trained as a forester originally, so I was delighted to see the John Calhoun Award, and my greetings to John's family. Trained as a forester originally. Every forester wants a woodlot to play with, and I'd never had my own woodlot. I'd had lots of other pieces of land to conserve and to love, but never my own. So small piece of land, or piece of land, 106 acres in Canterbury, I'd been trying to buy for a number of years. And finally, through a series of miracles, it came on the market, and the price dropped, and the price dropped again. This was 2012, just in the 2 months after I finished divinity school. And through a fortuitous gift of money, I was able to buy the land. First time I went walking on it after actually owning it, a little voice came and said, "Start a church. Start a church." And I said, "Oh my goodness gracious. You mean a woods church?" I could do a woods church. what's a woods church? So that has been the guiding question of the last 8 years of my life. What is a woods church? In 2014, we began what is now Church of the Woods, trying to put into practice the beginning understanding of what is a woods church. I suspect many of you, and we'll have a moment to explore this later, many of you have experiences of the land that you might describe in church terms. Church of the Woods is a church in the formal sense of that, following the pattern of prayer and worship of the Episcopal Church, but translated to make sense in the earth. So I just want to mention 3 quick characteristics of Church of the Woods that define it. First, we meet outdoors. We have 106 acres, as I mentioned. At the time in 2014, when we started worship, the land had just recently been logged, not kindly. It was pretty well trashed. High graded stream, just the stream at the entrance of the property, loggers didn't bother to put in a culvert. They just filled the stream with boulders and gravel, destroyed a little wetland, just trashed the place. So we meet on that land, substantially restored now. We did a lot of work of that on the ground ecological restoration, but even more that I'll mention a little bit as spiritual restoration. So 1, we meet outdoors. We do have a small barn with a wood stove where we gather in the winter, in the rain. But the core of the land itself is the spiritual, the sacred place. So that's the first characteristic. Second, most of you probably, to the extent you attend a church, think about the sermon, where the minister, the clergy person, talks at great length, perhaps about something interesting and useful, and perhaps not. Church of the Woods, we do that a little bit differently. I give a very brief 2 or 3 minute invitation to people, and then everybody goes off for 20 minutes of silent contemplation, reflection, sitting or walking in the woods. And even when it's winter and we're meeting in the barn, we spend that 20 minutes outdoors. The point of this is to listen to what the woods have to say to us, and to listen to what God, or the divine mystery, however we want to speak of that, what that might speak to us through the woods. So it's a listening practice, immersed in the woods, understanding that the woods speak to us, that God, that the divine, the sacred mystery speaks to us through our experiences in the land. So we meet outdoors, we listen to the woods, and then we come back and we share with each other what we may have heard or felt. And we bring offerings back from the woods: twigs, sticks, mushrooms, fungi, moose scat and other scat have been known to be brought back, and to share what we found, what we encountered, what we thought about in the woods, but also in our hearts. The third element of Church of the Woods is what we return to the land itself. Church of the Woods is a healing place where the woods heal us, but we, by our prayerful practice, also heal the woods. We can heal the land. There's a different dimension of conservation here, of who are we as we enter the woods, as we walk on the land. What kind of presence do we bring to the earth herself? By coming in a prayerful, spiritually grounded practice, we actually deepen that sense of sacredness that is held in and by the land. So through our prayerful presence, we help heal the land just as the land heals us. And finally, the practice of communion, of the bread and the wine. The first piece of bread and the last sip of wine are always offered to the earth herself in recognition of the gifts that we receive from the earth, and that the healing practice of our worship is not limited to human beings, but is in fact intended for the entire earth. So those are some simple characteristics of what Church of the Woods is and how we do it. Now I'm going to pause my talking for a minute and switch to inviting each of you to go into your imagination and allow to surface in your mind, in your heart, a piece of land, a place where you have encountered that sense of divine mystery, of the sacred, of peace, of healing, and invite you to, as a place comes to your mind, to enter that into the chat room, to chat to all participants and share what place that is and some of the words that describe your experience there, or the meaning of that, what that place means to you. So for this, we're going to take a minute, 60 seconds, to just be in silence and listen. Listen to your own heart, listen to your own imagination. Allow a place to come to mind and some descriptions of what that place means to you. So let us be still for a minute. Well, let us come back together. I'm not seeing responses in the chat box, so either you guys are being very shy or my technology isn't working. So I invite, thank you. Thank you for some of you beginning to respond. Standing on a rock with waves crashing at Moosehead Lake, pure joy. In the ocean swimming, a buffer from the noise of the world, deep in the woods, away from civilization. Invite other people to share your reflections of particular places and those experiences. The Wapak Trail, being there with my father, family. Hemlock forest, wisdom, wild abundance, diversity, vibrant color, quiet, breeze, flies, the sunrise, lazy brook. Hi, John, it's good to see your voice. Quaker chapel, small lake, the presence of other creatures. Just the extraordinary beauty, the peace, the recognition that there's something bigger than we are, sheer awe, wonder, delight. All creatures sharing this world. We are not the only ones here. The memories of joy, heaving bales of hay, family woodlot. So many families. Jackson Falls, oh yes. Rushing water, just the miracle of water. How often, how important that is to us. It flows within us, it flows around us. The miracle of all these different forms of life. The work that we do, as we protect pieces of land is in fact sacred work when we think about these qualities that transcend our simple physical existence and invite us to tap into, to be aware of the deeper realities, whatever name we may put to that, the deeper realities of existence. Where does this all come from? The eternal philosophical, theological question. Where does the universe come from? Why is it here? Why is it so beautiful? Why does it move us so deeply, so profoundly? Why are we moved to work so hard, to raise money, to do so many things, to protect these lands? Why does it matter to us so much? And it matters, of course, because of the physical reality of it. But I suggest to you that there's something deeper still. It stirs us in our very souls. And part of what my work is about is restoring the ability to speak in those terms to the conservation movement. Science is critical and all the other nuts and bolts things are critical, but what's beneath that is the way that the earth speaks to our soul and what it calls us to do and to be in return. So with that, I'm going to stop. I know we're near the end, to invite us if anybody who has questions, and then at the very end, I'll give you some nuts and bolts about Church of the Woods in case anybody would like to come visit. But if anybody has questions, or simply to rejoice in the beauty of these comments and these experiences, these memories, these places that we all have, or we would not be here this morning. So if anybody has questions or comments, if not, we'll just keep going with these chat experiences because they're so beautiful. Let me say, I'll give you a few just words about Church of the Woods. We gather every Sunday. We are gathering now. We started up again in June, wearing masks and keeping distance. As a result of COVID, we're not gathering in the woods for the main part of our gathering, simply because we don't have a space big enough to spread out. But we gather. We have a large labyrinth. Kind of a quarter-acre clearing, and what formerly was the log landing that we restored and reclaimed and transformed from a trashed log landing into a labyrinth. So there's a labyrinth about 60 feet in diameter to come and walk, and trails, 3 or 4 miles of trails. I'm still working on creating others. The trails are always open, and services are at 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. Every Sunday. And as I say, the trails are open all the time, and would love to have you all come and visit. You can find me at our website, Kairos Earth, K-A-I-R-O, I'm going to type it here, kairosearth.org is our website, which has information about Church of the Woods and the way to contact me. So thank you all very much. Ryan, do I turn this back to you or to Lindsay? But thank you, everybody, for your attention and for the invitation to be here.
Thank you, Steve. Yes, you have handed it back to me, and we'll shift gears to move into the last part of our program. I'll tell people that mostly due to my verbosity, which is legendary, we're running a little behind schedule, and there's about 10 minutes left in the program, and I hope everybody will be comfortable staying with us right to the end, and we'll have some time for overall question and answers for those who want at the end. So having reviewed the year behind us earlier in the program, I'll now give you a glimpse of the year ahead before we come to our closing. We have probably about 20 land protection projects either actively underway right now or under consideration. And while some of them may not come to fruition, I think it's going to be a busy year, and I'll share with you a few of the projects that we're pretty confident will get across the finish line. First, we're working in Winchester to purchase a conservation easement on 24 acres of Piccadilly Farm. Owned and operated by Bruce and Jenny Worcester, Piccadilly sells produce at the farm and in local retail stores, but they are primarily a community-supported agriculture farm, or CSA, providing regular allotments of produce to approximately 1,000 households in New Hampshire, Vermont, and Massachusetts. Piccadilly is actually much larger than the acreage we're protecting now, but 46 acres in the southern part of the farm, outlined in yellow, were already protected under a state of New Hampshire program by the prior owners in 1987. The project, which has already received grants from New Hampshire's Land and Community Heritage Investment Program, or LCHIP, and a federal farmland conservation program, also includes a twist. In addition to the conservation easement, we'll also put in place a mechanism that, in the event the farmers ever decide to sell, ensures that the whole farm may only be sold to another active farmer and keeps the price affordable. Sometimes, when projects are still early in the process, we'll keep names and locations private so as not to raise public expectations prematurely. This brand new conservation easement project features forests and fields that are hayed by a local farmer. It abuts and buffers the town-owned hill in the background, which is a popular hiking destination. The entire area is designated a priority conservation area in that town's open space plan. A project I can name is our partnership with Croca Expeditions, a nonprofit wilderness expedition school and camp, to protect their land in Marlow. Their conservation ethic is very strong, so they wanted to walk the talk, so to speak, by permanently protecting their land with a conservation easement. In addition to their main, primarily forested headquarters property, the project will protect a 13-acre field that is part of Croca's organic farm. Other important features to be protected include a headwater stream of the Ashwillet River and Croca's network of public hiking trails. We're very excited to be working toward the purchase, and in this case, the purchase of the whole property, not just a conservation easement, of 132 acres in Dublin, now owned by the Girl Scouts. For many years, the Girl Scouts used this property for primitive camping programs, but no longer having a use for it, they're now seeking to sell it, and we're seeking to buy it for a few reasons. First, the property is another puzzle piece in a north-south conservation corridor, like what I described earlier in the program. Not far to the north and northeast are big blocks of conservation land in Harrisville, Marlborough, Roxbury, and Nelson. And to the south are properties we hope to see conserved in the next few years, which then connect to the huge block of conserved land around Mount Monadnock. Second, the property features more than a half-mile of the Monadnock Sunapee Greenway Trail, a long-distance hiking trail that connects those two mountains. Now, I need to provide a disclaimer. Though the property is near Route 101, it doesn't actually have frontage on 101, so we're still working to verify that we have legal access to the property via an old road of questionable status that leads into it from the highway. If that access can't be ensured, we may need to go back to the drawing board, but we're crossing our fingers that it will work out in our favor. We have a fundraising goal of about $170,000, and while we've already made a big dent in that, we still have plenty to raise, so if you think you can help, please let one of us know. Finally, we hope this will be the year we'll complete a conservation easement at Distant Hill Gardens and Nature Trail in Walpole. This project has taken a long time, but the reason is that the owners, Michael and Kathy Neri, keep buying more land, and we all want to ensure that the easement covers everything. If you've never been to Distant Hill, I encourage you to visit. In terms of conservation values, the property has all the bells and whistles, rare natural communities, wetlands, wildlife habitat, but what makes it even more special is the accessibility of it all. Michael and Kathy have built an extraordinary trail network throughout the property, including portions that are universally accessible. So those were a few of the more traditional land protection projects in the works for the year ahead. But now I want to tell you about a few other initiatives because they're a little different for us. Some of you may remember our Kids Connect program, and unfortunately, due to the pandemic, we were not able to hold it this summer. That program was born of a desire by us to become more aware of human needs in our community and to be more creative about how we could help meet those needs. which we did by lending our strengths in fundraising and project management to scale up an existing program to bring kids on weekly farm visits for some good, clean fun and to learn where healthy food comes from. This idea of land trusts helping to meet a broader set of community needs beyond ecological preservation has come to be known as community conservation. And it comes from a recognition that as organizations who have proven ourselves to be highly effective and powerful, we have an opportunity, if not an obligation, to expand the scope of benefits we can provide to a greater number and variety of people. And there's a practical obligation in this too. If we are to deliver on our promise of protecting land in perpetuity, we need to broaden the tent of people who feel that conservation and what we do are relevant to their lives. But here's the catch. We don't get to decide or assume what those points of relevance are, of what other people care about. It might be mental health or youth development or homelessness, but to truly learn and to demonstrate that we want to learn, we need to listen and listen authentically. So this past winter, we embarked on a listening campaign. The board and staff conducted 32 one-on-one interviews with community members believed to have insights on community needs outside the environmental sector. One of the things we learned, interestingly, is that outside a passionate yet very small group, probably a lot of us here today, the Conservancy is relatively invisible to the majority of the community. That told us that we had some work to do. Yet we also learned that there is so much potential for overlap between nature and conservation and other community needs. We also learned that making this shift need not entail a trade-off. We don't need to stop protecting land for ecological integrity and biodiversity and wildness. We don't need to suddenly reinvent ourselves as teachers or social workers. We can bring to the table what we already do well, yet simply apply it in different ways. Which brings me back to where I sat in my introductory video. Think back for a moment to when you were first introduced to play or recreation in nature. For many of us, it was probably as kids. And think now of the role time in nature plays in your life today. Think of how those experiences influenced your development and your quality of life. Now, imagine that you never had the opportunity to do these things. Think about how your life would be different. This is the reality for a lot of people, young and old. Yet in that reality is also an opportunity. The Winchester Nature Center is a preschool and daycare that meets critical childcare needs in Winchester and surrounding communities. It also happens to be run by a visionary executive director, Roberta Royce, who believes in the power of outdoor play in natural settings for positive child development. Years ago, the center came to own 3.5 vacant acres next door to its main facility on the edge of downtown Winchester. And ever since, Roberta has dreamed of turning that land into a nature park for use by the center and by the community. Not a jungle gym park with slides and swings, but a nature park with dirt trails and rocks and logs to climb on amidst the trees and grasses. The problem was, though she had the vision, she lacked the funding and the expertise to build it. At the same time, we at the Conservancy, who know a thing or two about managing natural spaces for outdoor recreation and are pretty good at fundraising, were looking for a way to bring nature and conservation closer to where people lived, and especially people who might have few opportunities to connect with nature. And so, once we found one another, we entered into a partnership. The Conservancy would lead the fundraising and manage the building of the trails and other improvements, and the center would plan and lead how that space, once transformed, would be connected with the children and the broader community, including through an environmental education program they're already developing. Now, this is actually a photo from Distant Hill, but it's an example of what a portion of the trails in the new nature park will look like, universally accessible and fully compliant with the Americans with Disabilities Act. And this is a map of the property from above. The Learning Center is down at the bottom. Other features in the plan include a wetlands boardwalk, a viewing platform, natural playscapes like rocks and logs to climb on, and benches. Now, this project has not been without its challenges, and our plans to build everything this summer were sidelined by the pandemic. But the good news is that we've raised nearly all the money needed, and we're hopeful that we can still build portions of the trail system this fall. If all keeps going according to plan, the entire park will be complete by this time next year. So with that, I now need to bring us to a close. In a moment, we'll have an opportunity for some questions and answers for those who wish. But first, a few final notes. I want to thank the entire board, the staff, especially Katrina Farmer for orchestrating this whole production, including all the video. The Reverend Stephen Blackmer, our volunteers, and most of all of you attending today, for making today possible, and for making possible all that we could celebrate today. We couldn't do it without you. I spoke a lot about our interest in connecting people with the land through public access, so I want you to know where you can go to find those places. On our website, under the Explore menu, you'll find a link to our hiking page. If you click on that link, you'll find a list of all the properties on which we welcome public access and maps and guides for those properties. If you click on one of those links, it will download the map or guide for that property. In this case, this is the guide for the Porcupine Falls Trail on the Calhoun Family Forest in Gilsum and Sullivan. And then you'll have it available to you to print at home or to stick on your phone to bring with you out on your hike. And we also hope you'll keep in touch via our monthly e-newsletter and social media. On our website, you can find our latest news, and at the bottom of every page are links to subscribe to our e-news and find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't remind you that the Conservancy is a donor-supported organization. We do receive some public funding for some of our big purchases, but our basic operations, what enables us to even initiate any of this work in the first place, depends on annual donations from friends like you. Your charitable giving is undoubtedly pulled in many different directions right now, and for very good reasons. But when you receive from us an invitation to give later this fall, and I'll warn you now, you will, I hope you'll accept it, and perhaps in the knowledge that a connection to land can help all of us through the most challenging of times. Thank you all once again.
Thank you, Ryan, and thank you everyone for sharing your Saturday morning with us. We hope you've enjoyed today's celebration. Ryan is now available to take any questions, but if you don't want to stay for the question and answer session, please feel free to log off at any time. Let's see if we have any questions. In addition to Ryan, Steve is still on the line too, if anyone has questions specifically for the Reverend.
There's a question I just saw pop up, Lindsay, and maybe even Katrina might want to chime in. I don't know how the two of you chose it, but someone had asked, what's the meaning of the rock that was chosen in our main photo for the postcard and for this screen right now?
Hi, everybody. This is Katrina. Lindsay and I spent an afternoon at the Mountain Brook Reservoir property in Jaffrey, and there's a lovely trail there called the Gramwick Trail. And as we were along the waterside at one spot, Lindsay's eye was drawn to this rock. And the fact that it was heart-shaped, I think is part of what made it connect with us. So we took some time taking some pictures there, not just this picture, but a bunch of other pictures from the property. And when it came time to pick an image to celebrate this event, we felt like this one stood out in our memory of just, it combined a sense of land and water, the fact that the heart shape to the rock, the connection with hands and people, it had a grounded quality to it, but also a spiritual quality. And so that's how we came to choose this image as the one to use to promote this event. And if you haven't yet walked the Gramwick Trail, it's a shorter trail, but it's a really quiet, beautiful place. And as we get into the fall, you'll see all the fall color reflected in the water. And each season holds its own magic.
That's a great segue, actually, to another question I saw from Antonia. Hi, Antonia. Do the trail maps and descriptions identify any that are suitable for those of us with some restrictions with regard to steepness, or maybe, you know, otherwise difficulty? It's a great question. And outside the the distances on the guides and maybe the indications of the topography on the maps that are included, you bring up a good point that there isn't necessarily a real specific indicator that this one particular trail is really good for those who might have mobility restrictions. I will say, though, that a few of them, I can tell you right now, are really good for that. So the Gramwick Trail that Katrina just described is quite nice. The Chamberlain Conservation Area I mentioned is great. Porcupine Falls, absolutely. It's a very, very short walk, and one that I would certainly recommend for anyone looking for an easier destination. But we'll look for opportunities maybe to highlight later on the specific ones that might be most suitable for that.
Thank you, Ryan, and thank you, Stephen, for answering a few more questions, both in the chat box and the question and answer box. If there are any more thoughts or comments, please go ahead and post them now. Otherwise, thank you once again for joining us this morning. That officially concludes today's program.